Now, firstly, I actually must thank Mr. Fowles for making my first point for me very eloquently, that British values cannot really be defined. And further to that, as I will demonstrate later on, if they cannot be defined, they cannot be promoted. Mr. Fowles defined for himself what his British values were, but they are not my British values, and they were not, I bet they're not the values of many of you in this room. And as a result, his values are not really true British at all. Now, before I go further into my speech, I must introduce our proposition tonight. You've just heard from Joe Fowles, a member of Secretary's Committee and second-year E&M student from Pembroke College. Joe's actually a Cambridge reject, which probably explains a lot more beside his college choice. To be honest, he would have been a lot better at proposing last week's motion, "This House would rather be anything than an Oxford student." However, as with university, he did get his second choice of debate. Second, we have Maajid Nawaz, who is a very complex man. He's a former Islamist. He was convicted in Egypt for it. And he's now standing as a Liberal Democrat parliamentary candidate in 2015. Now, I think Mr. Nawaz will feel very at home with the Liberal Democrats and Mr. Clegg, as ideological U-turns are something they are really quite good at. And finally, we have Dominic Greene, the former Attorney General, ex-ALCA President and Magdalen alumnus. Whilst at Magdalen, Mr. Greene and his friends threw ex-policing minister Dominic Greene into the Cherwell after a boozy dinner. I really hope the same fate doesn't befall anyone speaking tonight after President's drinks. Now, to argue for this motion, to argue the state should promote British values, requires a singular, cohesive definition of what these values are. The proposition cannot give you this tonight, and from what Mr. Fowles has said, I doubt they will. You must oppose this motion. Now, the Department for Education, driven by then Secretary of State Michael Gove, set out their British values as democracy, individual liberty, mutual respect, and tolerance of other faiths and beliefs. Interestingly, David Cameron disagreed with his own cabinet minister when defining his British values. Now, he claimed freedom, the respect for the rule of law, belief in personal and social responsibility, and respect for British institutions were his British values. Now, when the Prime Minister and his own cabinet cannot agree on British values, how on earth can they claim to promote them? What are they going to promote? The state cannot promote anything the government itself cannot agree on, because the state will then be promoting a contradiction. We're promoting two different things, and that isn't promotion at all. Take it.
They both sounded very much like the same values to me.
They were similar, they were not the same. Yes, similar, not the same. As I previously said, if you do not have the same definition, you're essentially promoting two different, if only subtly different things. And you cannot get effective promotion of anything if your definition is not singular and cohesive.
Well, sorry.
No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. Sorry. The question must be answered by the proposition. What are British values? Is it simply the average of the values of the 60 million plus people in the UK? A sort of aggregate, sort of a fudge that will satisfy nobody? Or are these some abstract set of values that the state comes up with that everyone else who disagrees is just dismissed? Take my core beliefs: equality, the supremacy of human rights, and compassion for our fellow human beings. They, though possibly compatible with the Gove's definition, are not the same. Yet, I would be willing to bet a lot of you in this room, a lot of people in Britain, claim that they would be key values to them. If we cannot agree on these values, we cannot promote them. If I don't agree, will I be dismissed by the state as someone who they do not want speaking on what British values are? Because if it is, that is not a Britain that is worth living in. No, thank you. That is not a Britain that is worth living for any of you. And frankly, it would not be a democracy anymore. The point I'm making is that people of Britain have differing values at their core. Vague similarity is not enough to claim to promote them. as what you're promoting will mean nothing. Unless you have a singular definition, you cannot promote these values. Now, even if you accept this questionable definition of British values, the hypocrisy of this government advocating these values is laughable. Systematically subvert, impede and undermine the very values they claim to promote. And as I was demonstrating they are doing so, they cannot be claiming to promote them on one hand and destroying them on the other. This government tramples upon democracy. House of Lords reform has been crushed. The opportunity to bring democracy to our upper house has failed. And this government has removed thousands upon thousands of schools from the control of democratically elected local councils, placing them in the hands of academy trusts who have no local accountability. This is not democracy. No, thank you. Turning to tolerance of other faiths. How can we have tolerance when by law our state schools have to have an assembly of a broadly Christian nature? This, by definition, is exclusive of other faiths or those with none. Tolerance is not appearing to advocate one thing above another. It's not saying our religion is right, sort of yours can just go into the corner. That is ignorance. Tolerance is acceptance. Tolerance is allowing all faiths to be properly discussed on merit. This cannot happen while you have Christian assemblies in your schools. Now, how about mutual respect? No, thank you. Coming from the government of divide and rule, a government that sets scroungers against savers, neighbours against neighbours. Mutual respect cannot be developed when you're dividing society like this. These are the actions of a divisive, reactionary government, not one advocating mutual respect. Suspicion is what this government creates, not respect amongst neighbours, amongst friends and amongst society. Now, finally, we have individual liberties, which the government claims are very part of British values. We have thousands of disabled people struggling to live independently because their benefits have been savagely cut. Thousands of people having to go to food bank every day just to eat. Rousseau defines liberty as requiring equality, and J.S. Mill says certain security rights, no thank you, are required to enjoy liberty. They include, but are not exclusive to, food, shelter and personal security. When this government are denying these to thousands of people, they cannot say they promote liberty. Liberty is not just for the well-off, it is for everyone. Unless the government provides it for everyone, they cannot say they are advocates of liberty. This government, the one proposing the introduction of state promotion of values, it acts directly against the values it claims to promote. They cannot be promoted when they are acting against it. It is a hypocrisy, and for that reason, you must reject this motion. No, thank you. Next, no, thank you. Again, no thank you, please. No thank you. Next, I turn to the dangers proposed by a state promotion of certain set of values. We must ask what a set of values is. It is an ideology. The Oxford English Dictionary defines an ideology as a set of values and beliefs characteristic of a certain social group. British values are being defined as a set of values characteristic of Britons, essentially a British ideology. Really, do we want the state promoting a singular British ideology? That is a frightening prospect. Promoting a single set of values, a single ideology, is not acceptable in a democratic nation. It undermines multiculturalism that brightens society in Britain, aiming to replace it with a single, bland, monochrome culture, one defined by the state. No, thank you. Ultimately replacing it with a single culture, a single set of values, a single, bland ideology is not something that is a happy nation, a free nation, a diverse nation. That would not be a nation I would wish to live in. Yeah.
You say that you want a free, diverse nation. Aren't those British values that you are supporting implicitly?
Pardon? Sorry, I couldn't hear.
You say that you want a free and diverse nation. Aren't you arguing against supporting British values by appealing to British values?
No, not at all. I'm saying that British values cannot be defined, therefore freedom is not a British value. Now finally, even if you accept this ridiculous definition, even if you accept the frightening prospect of state ideology, you must recognise that values are not static. 50 years ago, homosexuality and equal rights for women would have been impossible because the prevailing values would have rejected them. Would we accept that today? Of course not. Now, except if you work for the Department of Education, who did tweet that it's ridiculous schools should teach Gay rights, because they want to teach a curriculum based on British values. Yes.
Is that a value or is that an issue? Because I think there's a very clear distinction.
Is what the tweet?
Discussing, minority rights. Surely that's an issue as opposed to a value, is it not?
But if you're claiming tolerance as a value, then it is part of what you will be saying is a value system. Now, what were prevailing British values 50 years ago will be seen as bigotry today, and culture changes every single day. 50 years ago, what is acceptable will be different from what it is today. Now, progress did not stop when we legalised homosexuality in the 60s. It did not stop in 2013 when we legalised equal marriage, and it has not stopped today. Progress continues. Values, a single definition of values is static. You cannot have a progressive nation and a static set of values. It is simply a contradiction. In summary, a lack of clear definition of British values makes it difficult for them to be promoted. They differ from person to person, and it is not possible to promote 60 million interpretations of what British values might mean. These interpretations that Mr. Fowles admitted do exist. No, thank you. The Honourable Member, be quiet. The Honourable Member said exist. A single, cohesive definition is required, and that does not exist and will not be provided tonight. No, thank you. No, thank you. Even if you believed that despite Cameron and Gove's disagreement, a cohesive definition does exist, the fact this government cannot promote their own values means the state cannot promote these values. The state should not promote these values. The precedent this government is setting in its promotion is terrifying. The dangers promoted by the very notion of a state set of values, a de facto ideology, should be clear to you all. This is not a path Britain should go down in order to maintain diversity and freedom. The state cannot support a single unchanging viewpoint. Progress must happen. If we did this 50 years ago, we would have no gay rights, no equal rights for women, and if we do so today, we will destroy future progress. For the future, for diversity and for progress, I beg to oppose.